Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We're excited to be here today. So first, a quick round of introductions. I'm Priscilla Vidal, Director of Product Marketing here at Procore. My team leads marketing and research efforts across our core tools. That includes project management, quality and safety, pre-con, and workforce management. Joining me today is Michael Beadle, VP of Operational Excellence at Ryan.
Perfect. Thanks, Priscilla. So, as Priscilla said, Michael Beadle, OpEx, which is what I like to describe as a very flowery title. So, what I do is to enforce alignment or try to get consistency in alignment with all of our business units across Ryan, which is always a fun job. History is about 10 years on the execution side, so the project management side, and then about a year and a half in this new role. So, and with me today is partner in crime, Nolan Barron, Senior Superintendent with Ryan.
Hey, nice to see all you guys. I have been with Ryan for about 20 years. I started as a laborer in 01 and have worked my way up to Senior Soup, and I am now a daily Procore user.
Awesome. So we're here to talk about Procore's project execution solution and how these tools can help teams coordinate design, collaboratively manage project activities, and turn project data into really actionable insights. So we'll cover everything from reducing risk to streamlining punch walks and really everything in between. So we'll kick things off here. We'd like to start off with a poll. And so if you can please make your way to slido.com and use the code shown on the screen. We'd love for you all to take your best guess as to what % of contractors finish projects on time and on budget. And we'll see this live in real time.
Priscilla, if you didn't know the answer, what would you guess?
Well, I guess 15%, since that seems to be the winner.
Well, I like our realism in this room. Look at that. We should put names next to who's responding. People would be lying.
Give it just a couple more seconds here.
I really wish we were down here at the 75%.
No.
I wish it was the case.
30%.
Oh, pretty good.
Okay, all right. Shifting a bit here. Well, according to a recent report, only 1 in 3 contractors say they always finish projects on time and within budget. We're really all aware that a construction project is really an intricate balance of work sequence, and any number of forces can interrupt that flow of work. So by connecting your stakeholders, processes, and project information in one place, you can really increase your ability to meet deadlines and budgets. With Procore's project execution solution, it's truly easier to manage the big picture of your project throughout the entire construction lifecycle. So now I'll hand it over to Michael to tell us more about how Ryan successfully uses these tools.
Perfect. Thanks, Priscilla. Well, we certainly do our best at that, but what we're not going to do is make this one big talking about how we only use Procore, and you can too, and so we're going to do all these things. But infomercial-wise, just want to start out by saying that Ryan, you probably know us as a GC, but we also have development work, A&E, so our in-house architects, we have capital markets, and REM, so real estate management as well. And I don't say that to really introduce you to Ryan, the infomercial piece as well, but to give you some context to what we're going to talk about today. We've got an opportunity internally at Ryan that we can very quickly iterate on what works and what doesn't work, because we have internal team members to do that. So we're going to talk through a couple of those opportunities today and what's worked for us and what really hasn't worked for us and what we've learned. And for context, we've been a Procore user for give or take about 7 years now. So where does that start? One of our mantras that we use, especially on our OpEx team, is trying to find the right team. So starting with the people, moving to the right tools. What are we using? How are we using those tools? And then that gets us the right insights. But what's the frustration behind this, right? And I'm hoping that many of you are going to connect to this frustration. But it's in the past, and even before we were on Procore, there's so many different tools out there, right? It's really hard to not feel like there's this wall in between everything. And I get it, and there's a lot of exhibitors here today that'll talk to you about how do we have connectors in between them, but no matter what, there's no perfect stream of when you have these disparate tools and pulling them all together. So what we needed was one central place where we could create the source of truth for information and our decisions and holding people accountable for, as we're working on a project, where do people go for that source of truth? And not just financial, but decisions on what are we supposed to be doing, what are we supposed to be focusing on for the project. That's where Procore comes in. That was that central platform. Now, equally important to the tools that we're choosing is how we leverage those tools. What are you doing with them? Because our job and what we want to do is we want to improve every time we have a project. None of them are perfect, but we want to get better every single time we have one of those projects. That's going to be a common theme in what you're going to hear us talk about today. So we want to use that shared knowledge to minimize our risk on projects. We want to maximize the profitability, and throughout the entire life cycle, we want to have quality and safety as ubiquitous, right? Those are the absolutes of our projects. And when we can do that effectively, especially when we've got multiple of our service lines here, we call that our collective insights. So where do we want to start our journey today? How do we want to tell you what Ryan has done well and what we've learned from, what we haven't done well? Well, we're going to start that off on design. So I'm going to turn it over to Nolan to talk through how we manage our design process in Procore.
What's the button?
That one.
Typical field guy, right? So we focus on reducing risk and delivering high quality projects right from the beginning. This takes enormous amounts of pre-planning and learning on every project, and we like to reduce our risk by utilizing building information modeling and design coordination, starting right with our pre-construction. So a successful project starts with thorough and thoughtful design management, and a lot of times this is a part of the process that we struggle with a lot because there's so many people involved, starting with your client, your design teams, your pre-construction teams. There's a lot of decisions that are being made before superintendents are involved with the project, and let alone responsible for the performance of it. So to kick projects off on the right foot, we require our designers to utilize BIM, and there it is. I need my cheat sheet. But we get our best results when we start those projects off with BIM, and we bring our superintendents early to push through coordination with construction documents, and that helps us minimize any conflicts or issues later in the field. So historically, virtual design and construction processes weren't integrated into Procore. And that's the tool that superintendents, that's the tool that we use every day on site. Having a model it's an amazing tool, it's great for project health, but if we don't have access to it, we're not going to be using it. So you've probably noticed Procore has introduced a couple of tools. One's called modeling, one's called coordination issues. So now all of us have this opportunity to have a spot inside Procore where you can dump your models, and you have access to them starting with design all the way through construction. So once you get your models from your architects, your engineers, you can dump them into Procore, and you have a spot where anybody who has access to Procore has access to those models. So I find it super useful for a couple reasons. I mean, it's useful for a lot of reasons, but I use it for a couple. One is it's great for finding clashes between things like structural elements and mechanical or electrical, for example. And I know that a lot of you guys are already doing that, but when your model is inside Procore, if you come across a problem, it's easy from there to create an observation or create an RFI. The second thing I like to use it for is it's a great tool to collaborate and to collaborate with your subcontractors and your foremen. It's a great way to use that tool to hold them accountable. I just got done building, or I was on a team, and we built a 45-story high-rise condo tower in Minneapolis, and during construction, I got a call from my plumber, and he's telling me, hey, I got to get my gas regulator up in the ceiling, above ceiling in one of the laundry rooms. Super congested area, and so he's telling me there's a duct running right where I'm supposed to be putting this thing, and so I grab my tinner, we run up there, run up to the 15th floor, and my plumber's up there trying to figure out how he's going to reroute his gas lines. My tinner's telling me, well, if I got to move that, that's going to be an extra because I got the next 5 floors already done. And in this scenario, a lot of superintendents, right, it's like, well, let's see what's on the drawing, and we even had a better solution here. We had a model built, so open up the model, take a look at it. Sure enough, my plumber's, he's right. The gas regulator goes right there, and that duct's supposed to be out in the hallway. So as much fun as it was to rub that mistake in my tinner's face, we actually realized that was a great learning experience for us, and we started using that tool a lot more to collaborate with each other. So it's a great tool.
I bet that tinner never questioned you again on that project. Isn't that right?
That is not right.
All right. Should we talk about where we go from there?
Yes, let's do that.
So Nolan just shared a great anecdote on what we can do during design and what happens when we have questions that are left in the design process, right? No design process is perfect. We never have enough time to get through that, but what happens next? Well, all those open design issues then, of course, get turned into RFIs. So, the big question that people like to ask is how many hours have we spent creating and chasing unnecessary RFIs, right? Sometimes that's simplified to the question of we want to just have less RFIs. Less RFIs would make it easier for everybody. I've got a little different turn on that, but what I can agree with is that we'd like to decrease the amount of time we spend on those RFIs. So show of hands, quick show of hands, we all want to decrease RFIs, right? Yep, they're a pain in the butt. No one does them right. They take too long to close. All right. So I agree. The take that I want to share is that RFIs are going to happen on your project, right? It's a little bit of a realist take. But there's 2 different kinds. One is bad RFIs, bad RFI management. And you've seen them. They create chaos of our teams. They waste time. They waste resources. They really complicate communication. And with too many of them, you start to get this antagonistic relationship between the designers on the project and your team that's building it, right? Sometimes it starts with the best of intentions and it goes downhill because there's just too many questions open and nobody trusts each other anymore. Okay, that's bad. The good RFIs, really and what they're for, is to connect the work that's going on in the field to your contract documents, right? Used correctly in the right amount of information at the right time, you're able to better leverage your schedule, you're better understanding of your cost control in your project, and ultimately that success, because you're building a good relationship between your designers and your team that's building it. So the question I really like to ask is how do we move from bad RFI management into good RFI management territory? So Ryan asked that question a number of years ago. It was actually led by our architecture group. And where we started is we started with benchmarking. So I don't expect you to be able to see or use any of the data on here. It's just a little snapshot of a dashboard that our insights team has built. But what we did to start is we started pulling RFI data from all of our projects, and we identified some of the key trends and progress against some performance indicators that we set. So we did this for both our internal design teams and for third-party designers. So even if you don't have an internal design team, you can do this with your partners. And what we expected to see is some of these relationships. We expected to see that the days to close, so essentially how long an RFI had been open, would be directly related to the cost impact or the schedule impact of that question, right? What is the main thing that we focus on with our design teams? That RFI or that submittal's been open for too long, right? You're past your due date, close it out and get it done. Right? That's what we expected. When we dove into the data, what we actually found is that the volume of RFIs, so how many were open at any given time, had a much larger impact on the quality of that response, right? And therefore, the quality of response would be how do we close it out and how do we minimize that cost impact? Because the longer it's open, of course, then the more impact it can have to the team of not having that answer. So what's really interesting in digging in there is that what was happening from a behavior standpoint is that our project management teams, our pre-con teams, whoever was asking the question, our superintendents, even subs, were just bombarding our designers with questions, right? Every time a new sub came on and had a contract signed, it was, here's my 20 different RFIs that I've got just for this one phase of the building. Go ahead and throw it in and get the answers done. Thank you, Nolan. And what that led to is this scenario where it felt like everything was critical, right? And we all know the adage of when everything is critical, then absolutely nothing is critical, and we couldn't prioritize. That's what was happening. We had this analysis paralysis happening that designers were just trying to get better at closing those RFIs out, but they were really shitty responses, to be completely honest. They just were. And so when you get too many out there, you just can't answer them right. So what we did is we started training our teams and doing two things. From the design side, we started having very, very focused design reviews earlier in the process and saying, okay, this week, right, we're 60 or we're 90 days ahead of where we want to be here. We're going to focus in on this area, or we're going to focus on this discipline. And we came together as a team and said, what are all the open questions that we've got? Pulled all the designers in that had anything to do with that area and threw all the questions on the table and worked through them, right? And in that way, we helped the design teams prioritize the answers that we really needed. You can do that by trade when the contracts are going out. You can do that by area, however it is, right? Discipline with your designers. But the key was focusing in and getting the questions asked in a timely manner, not just everything in the kitchen sink and get it in the system because we want to document it, right? It's getting a little bit away from that CYA side. On the construction team side, we really had to educate, and this is a work in progress, we really had to educate our project management team on how to ask a good question. There were a lot of things that were just taken either verbatim from our trade partners and being thrown into the system of give me a dimension, or they were crafting a question that really was not based in the information that we needed, right? So we had to teach our teams, if you know the answer to something, don't ask a leading question. Give the expected response, right? Ask for confirmation rather than just throwing something out there. The goal is not to just CYA and document. The goal is to get the answer that you need in a timely manner. And so in doing that, we had a smoother process and a happier team. When we've really dug into the bad behavior, that's what we got out of it. And so what we were really trying to fix is this cry wolf attitude, because if you get enough of that bad behavior along the way, you all know what happens is nobody trusts what the most important thing is anymore, and then everyone is running in whatever direction that they're measured on, right? So we wanted to have a central place to benchmark, to measure what we thought were the key performance items, which really led us to what's the bad behavior that's happening, and so we could address it. The second thing that we were doing with RFIs is trying to document our lessons learned. So I'll fully admit this is rather new, and we're getting into this, but we have seen questions being asked over and over and over on projects. So something that may connect with all of you out there is ADA standards, right? If you're doing any kind of housing or multifamily out there, you know that every single project, at least we're making mistakes on what the ADA clearances are and all the things that we need to think about, kitchens, bathrooms, etc. And so what we are trying to do is bring all of that knowledge into a central place and then turn it into design checklists so we don't ever have to ask those questions again. We can tell our design teams at the right stage, whether it's SDs or DDs or CDs, here are the things that we need you to tackle at this phase, get these questions right, so we don't have to ask them as RFIs as they come back. And that's when we really start to make some impact with our design teams, because the documents we get are better, are more thorough, right? What this really allowed us to do is overall reduce our design contingency on our large projects and sign our contracts with clients or internal earlier in the process, which is our goal with design build, right? We want to be able to lock in on the lowest level of information possible. But to do that, we need confidence that our documents are clear and have the information that they need. And going through this has built that confidence with our teams. So I know Nolan's a fan of less RFIs and less observations waiting in the field. Fair to say?
Absolutely.
All right, I'll hand it back to you.
All right, thanks, man. Yeah, so another way that we are learning lessons is through observations. I know that a lot of you are familiar with how that works, or how observations works. You can create one in the field as you come across an issue. Or you can create observations for a pre-planned inspection. At Ryan, we love this tool. We use it all the time. Us superintendents use it all the time, and we started figuring out ways that maybe we can kind of extend how this tool is utilized. So, are your design consultants or architects, are they using the observations tool when they do their monthly field reports? I don't expect you to answer, but if they're not, they should be. It's not as efficient to get an emailed report from your architect for their monthly reports when you have a tool like Procore at your fingertips. Say you've got an architect doing a monthly site walk. It typically goes like this, right? They show up, they walk the site, they jot down notes if they come across an issue, they take some photos, they complete their walk, they go back to their office, they compile this report, and then like a week later, they send it off to you and your team, and then as you get this report, you have to sift through it, you figure out where does everything apply, are these items accurate, and then you start pulling in your subcontractors and start divvying out lists, and you complete these items or they complete these items, and then you start tracking the completion of this. So all the while you're passing these PDF files back and forth via email or paper. It's an inefficient process, starting with your designers, the on-site teams, the GC, your subcontractors. So we had this kind of light bulb moment, like maybe we can use observations in a new way, and currently we're doing this with our in-house architects, Ryan A&E, when they come out to do their site monthly walks. They're utilizing the observation tool for those field reports. So now as they walk, they've got their iPad or their phone, and as they come across an issue, they create an observation, they can pin that location, they can take a picture, they can link a drawing, they can create a narrative. But for me, the most important thing they can do is they can identify a responsible party right there. Like they can nail one of my foremen right to that item, and they're getting notified right then. They're not waiting a week to get that report, and they're not waiting another week for me to sift through that and dish it back out. It's immediate. I think what works best about having everything in observations is you've got a tool that can track the progress. It can track the responses that you get, and
Pulls it all together.
Pulls it all together. There you go. So items can be closed faster. I can spend more time planning ahead, less time looking back and tracking all these items. On that same 45-story tower, I'd get that architectural monthly walk report. I'd take the skip up to the 45th floor. I'd walk every floor on my way down, checking off items that are completed, circling those items that were incomplete, and I get back down to my desk, update my list, fire off those 15 emails to my foreman. So from a contract perspective, our architects, they have to give us this report, and us in the field, we then have to respond. So we might as well welcome our design teams into this process through Procore and save some time. It's efficient for everybody. And this is one example of how we've extended Procore to incorporate our design teams and our construction teams. And even better, it sounds like observations are even easier, Priscilla?
Yeah, they sure are. So Procore recently released Quick Capture, which is a faster way to document efficiencies throughout your project. So if you've ever dictated a text, talked to Alexa or Siri, the technology that powers this is speech-to-text translation. And so with Quick Capture, users can significantly cut down the time it takes to log observations, really by automating this data entry in the field, as you just heard from Nolan in that example. So anyone can start recording a video of observations by simply speaking to Procore. So Procore will create the observation, attach a photo, and begin filling out the fields just by listening to you. So even better news, Nolan, it's also available for Punch.
Yes. So exciting because we all love punch lists, right? But really though, I think at Ryan we're excited about this feature. We know that punch lists are tedious, they can be brutal. We know that they are not going away. On my project, when it's time for a punch walk, I'm trying to recruit as many people as I can because I know that it's going to take 2 people recording for that one person, spotting issues, right? And each of those people in that group has their own priorities, right? You've got the impatient people, you've got the meticulous people. The common thread through all the punch lists I've ever been on is that you're just going too fast, right? You don't get information recorded in the right way so that your subcontractors can get back in and complete those items properly. So I know I'm ready to give this a shot on my next project or my current project when we get to the punch phase. Mikhail?
Absolutely. So we're going to do a live demo. Should we try a live demo in here? What do you think, guys? Just kidding. So unfortunately for this new quick punch process, that's going to take away our ability to play the blue tape joke on all of our architects and owners. So I don't know if that's one of your favorite parts of the punch walks, but that's definitely where I got my kicks, by bringing one strip of blue tape to the punch walk and saying this is all you get. So only once did I have an architect match my smartassery and tear little tiny pieces of the blue tape and put them all on the wall. Anyways. So in all seriousness, I completely agree with Nolan. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, and he shared something with me that really stuck. As superintendents certainly, and even as project managers, it's just reinforced in us that the punch is that last moment that we make an impact on the client, right? And so it is extremely important that we get that right. You can do everything right all the way to the end of the project, and if you bungle that closeout process, you can look bad with the client, and that's not what we want. So getting that documentation right, getting it done the first time, and getting to that holy, I'm just going to take one pass through everything and be done with it, this makes it just one step closer. Because we don't want information capture to be that bottleneck, that's the enemy. We want to get it right the first time so that we've got more time to spend on addressing those issues and getting on to the next project, right? Because that's what happens. By the end of the project, Nolan's saying he's calling for 20 people and 5 people are already assigned to the next one, right? Let's have less time on closeout, get it right, communicate it, and get it done. So we encourage you to try this quick capture, and we're excited to as well. Okay, so I want to bring this all together. We've talked about a lot of tools, and hopefully we've given you a couple of nuggets and something you can go try. But what does it really mean, right? How does this apply to our overall strategy, and what can it do for the company? So, I want to make the point that using some of these tools is not the same as leveraging them. But what does that mean, right? So Procore is robust, they do a lot of things, and it's also really flexible. I'll be completely honest, that's sometimes the bane of our existence because we have to tell people, I know you can do that, but you shouldn't do that, right? Knock it off, that's not how we do things here. But it really refines a good point that you can use Procore however that you need to meet some of your business goals, right? But how do you do that? And we've got another little mantra that we think about, and actually our CIO brought this to us just recently, but in this order, it's people, and then it's process, and then it's technology. Right? So what does that mean? You care about your people, you figure out what you need to do to support them, then you clearly outline the process for what you want. What are the behaviors? What are those expectations? What do you want to achieve? And then you find the tool, find the technology to support those two. And luckily enough, because of that robustness, the flexibility, we're able to shape Procore to do a lot of those things. So in order that we care, people, process, and technologies, right? And when we do that, our goal is to provide the tools to our teams to, 1, execute consistently, and 2, delight and exceed expectations of our clients. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a pain point now, and maybe you've all felt this, but certainly over the last 5 years, one of the biggest pains has been in standardizing all of our work and aligning our project managers, our superintendents, our pre-con folks, etc., wherever they work. Right? So this is primarily driven by the growth that we've all seen, or many of us have seen. The last 5 years have been great, truly. Some have taken that well and some haven't. We definitely had the bumps along the road. And it's good for the business, but it also leaves our leaders in a really tough spot, right? I was managing a team a number of years ago, and I felt like I had no time to onboard my team. I felt like I had very little time to focus on how I train them up. Right? So I'm leveraging tools and videos that are out there and say, go learn from this person, but realistically, that's not the right way to do it. And that's not even to speak to the actual managing part, right? How are we managing our people? We just don't have enough time to do that. So new talent to your company can be invigorating. You learn so much from them, and it can be exhausting. At least that's my experience. And really the question we keep asking ourselves is, people are bringing in the new best way to do something. And sometimes it's great, but how do you stop those new best ways from being bad behaviors at your company? And what we found is having that single platform that you're saying, this is my source of truth, this is how we're using this tool. So you document the processes for the people, you tell them what the expectations are, and that way you can keep everybody together, right? So by standardizing, you're reducing that risk, and you're giving everyone that source of truth for the right information. And what that really does is that consistency builds trust that your project managers, that your superintendents, your pre-con folks are not reinventing the wheel for every time they do a process, right? That's certainly how I felt in the past. That's how some of our smaller regions feel when they're executing. You don't have the same resources. Well, let's just go figure it out in a different way, right? You don't want to let it get to that point. So, and in that way, Procore has been a tool that we really lean on as we've grown. Okay, last point here I'm going to make, all the way back to where we started. What are our goals? Well, our goals are standardizing how we use our tools so that we can increase our performance on our projects, and then we can further improve on every single project that we do. I'm going to give you two major examples of here on how this has worked. Before I jump into that though, it's a good goal to be consistently average. That may be a controversial view here, but I'm going to explain it, right? It was said earlier in our keynote something to the effect of you fall to the level of your lowest performing expectations. Something to that tune, right? But it's true that the people that don't know how to execute in whatever your system is are probably the weak links in how we're going to execute our work, right? So we want to rise that level of consistency within the organization. But I think you're all here to go further than that. And so I think we have this shared goal of saying, great, we want to standardize, but we also want to continue to outperform. So how are we going to do that? Well, one example, and you can see here a number of Amazon warehouses. We build warehouses across the country for Amazon. The really nice thing about those is that Amazon has a high standard of we want it to look exactly the same. Right? We want it to look the same, feel the same, have the same base spacing because they've got really locked in programs for how they use these buildings. And two things that came for us, when we build 30 of them or 40 of them a year, we can learn from every single one of those, and we do. But what we found is that we got called out to the carpet many times for building the same building but having totally different delivery methods, right? So our project managers got to the end, our superintendents got to the end the same way, but it just looked different, right? So what do we do to standardize that? Well, throughout these projects and in Procore, we're constantly pulling financial, schedule, RFI, observation data, et cetera, so we can execute better on the next. And a really good example of this is during COVID, when bar joists were out at 60 weeks or 65 weeks or wherever they were, we started using fabrication drawings from previous projects to go out and bid and even get shop drawings prior to award for our steel contracts. So when we knew about the next project that was coming down, we would take those documents out, take the actual final fabrication drawings, go use those to bid with an SD set of here's how big the building is, here's how many bays you've got. And then upon award, we would say it is 62 weeks to get it, and it's $10 million down today, and we're gonna get started in 6 months, right? Because otherwise we would run out of work. But that saved a significant portion of time by pulling forward that information that we already knew from the previous project. And in the same way, that allowed us to be nimble on different design iterations, right? So we could look at what other strategies do we have and how does that affect the overall program. So Second example here, we had a food and beverage client that we're building a relationship with. We started a project with them in California about 2 years ago. I'll equate it to like the first date, where it's really exciting, but you make these weird mistakes and you don't really think about it too much because you're excited and you want to keep building the relationship. But what we learned is that this client had significant standards that they wanted to hold and do exactly the same thing, project after project after project. And it was actually them that suggested to us, if we make 5 million decisions on a project, but we only want to make 500. We want you to make the rest of those. So why don't we just collaborate in your tool? And hopefully you've experienced this, and if not, that you will. But we brought that client into Procore. And so we would have less one-off emails, less reports, less photo documentation, less everything that's one-off communication, because they were in the tool working with us and seeing some of that work real time. Right? And it really helped build that trust and transparency to let that relationship grow over the entire United States. And now we're doing 12 different projects for them in just about 18 to 24 months. So how do we use Procore technology to leverage project after project after project? We capture it, we understand it, we push it out to the teams so they can execute the same, no matter if we're in Minnesota or Florida or Iowa, as you see up here. All right, I'm going to hand it off to Priscilla to wrap us up.
Awesome. So really, completely agree with Michael. For us at Procore, it's really awesome to see how our teams like Ryan are thriving by leveraging tools like BIM, RFIs, observations, and Punch in such a truly impactful way. So before we wrap up, I'd like to recap the key takeaways from today's presentation. So we talked about how you can mitigate risk early on, learn from RFIs, include all stakeholders in the observations tool, and reduce time on manual data entry. So all of this to say that using Procore's project execution tools can really help support operational excellence with really one integrated solution. So I'd like to thank Michael and Nolan for your time today and for sharing your awesome knowledge and insights with everyone in the room here. It's been really fun to hear how a full-service commercial real estate firm like Ryan really understands how to leverage Procore's tools and bring them to life from dirt to build. So we want to thank all of our customers out there, and we want y'all to be as successful as Ryan. And so if you'd like to learn more about these tools, the URL is just right down there below, and you can take a look. So we'll go ahead and wrap up here. We have a few minutes for questions, I think. Otherwise, thank you all for your time today.